Let's open our Bibles to the Gospel according to Luke. We're in chapter 22. And we've spent about 3 weeks now looking at Jesus alone in the garden. The place where in the first garden God said, Jesus said. The Logos, the Word of God, even there, the one who walked with Adam in the garden. When he created Adam, he said it's not good for man to be alone, and yet that one is alone. And he's here in the garden, and we've seen how he pleaded for support from his friends, his closest friends, Peter, James, John, the ones he'd done the most for. He said, my soul is deeply distressed to the point of death. I'm dying. My soul is distressed to the point of death. Watch and pray with me. But his friends failed him. They loved him. The spirit was willing. The flesh is weak. And then he appealed to the Father. Abba, Papa, Daddy. Father, all things are possible for you. Remove this cup from me. And again, though the Father didn't fail him, the desire Jesus had as a man, a perfect man, yeah, but as a man, looking for human comfort and not finding it. Now looking to the Father for the only help that he could see that would really help, and yet it wasn't going to be that way. And then he did something so wise, something we all need to learn to do. He surrendered not to a silent father or a failed father, but to a love on a higher plane, so much higher than human eyes, even the eyes of Jesus. He couldn't see right that moment. At that moment, he couldn't see any other way, but he's asking, is there another way? And then he says, not thy will, or no, not my will, but thy will be done. And yet he says that not in a pious King James English. It's not what I want, what you want, not because you're a bully, but because you're my Father. What you have is higher. I can't see it. It's on a plane so much above and beyond what I can conceive of. So I'm going to let go. The only thing I'm holding on to. I have this thought. I have this idea. I have this hope and prayer like a balloon. I'm hanging on to it, and I'm just going to let it go. I'm going to let it go where I can't go, and I'm going to say, I give it over. I surrender it. I'm not what I want, not what I'm asking, not what I'm praying, but what you want. And you know, the Father is good, and how he cares. And what Jesus did, he did for us, and what we learned from him is something that, oh God, how we need to learn it. And then we saw last week that when his body was at the point nearly about to die, just like it was in the wilderness when he'd gone without food for 40 days and 40 nights. And his body, the human body can only handle so much. And again, an angel sent to strengthen him, an angel coming not to help him escape, but to help him endure, because he had to pray this through a little longer. He still wasn't at that place where he could fully rise from prayer. He's still battling in prayer. And so the angel comes to him there in the garden, just as Jesus, I believe, was the angel of the Lord who went to Elijah in the wilderness. And he who had been the strengthening angel now receives a strengthening angel, and he receives that strength so that today he can continue to do that, to strengthen us. And like we ended last week, I now believe I see strengthening angels all around me. I'm not psychotic, I don't think. Am I? No, I don't think I am. It's not that I see things that others don't see. It's just that I'm learning to see things that I haven't seen that have always been there. One day Jesus said, people will be saying, when did we see this? When did we see that? He says, when you deal with even the least of my brethren, it's me that you're dealing with. And so, like I said last week, I think these strengthening angels, they're not so far off, and I think they're among us still, and I think that many of you are among those strengthening angels. I'm honored to be able to give anything that helps strengthen you, to go out and strengthen others. It's a blessing to be here. It's an honor to be here. But as we move into the next section of this, we go from strengthening angels to a fallen angel. Just like it was in that first garden, the serpent comes, takes center stage. He comes into the garden, but this time, Adam is ready. This time, the second man, the last Adam, Jesus, he's ready. He's been praying. He's been prepared. The angel has come there in verse 43. The angel from heaven appeared to him, strengthened him so that he could pray further. He was in agony. He was praying fervently. His sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground. But finally, he rose from prayer. We've seen 3 times over. But finally, he rose from prayer. He's ready. He came to his disciples, quite the opposite. He found them sleeping from sorrow. They were going the other direction. Humanity still sleeps. But the Son of Man is ready. He says, I'm ready to face it. And I'm facing it for you. He said to them, like he did to us last week, why are you sleeping? There's a place, there's a time for it. Elijah needed to sleep. Right now, no, you need to be ready. Rise and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The disciples aren't ready. We'll see that. You know the story. You know where it's going. They're not ready. But Jesus is ready. And while he was still speaking, behold, a multitude came. And the one called Judas, one of the 12, was walking there in front. And he approached Jesus to kiss him. The Judas kiss. How many images, how many plays, how many pictures have been drawn from this one? The Judas kiss. And like a lot of things that enter into just common language, maybe we get it twisted, maybe we get it wrong. It's our study here today, but it's not our focus. The Judas kiss must never be our focus. God help us. This is a place to look at, and in reflection we can see the Son of Man, we can see our Savior, but this is no place to live, no place to dwell. The Judas kiss. It happens. Betrayed by a friend. It happens. Backstabbed with a kiss. How much worse it hurts. It happens. It happened to him. Jesus knows. But as always, now that you know he knows, lift up your eyes and look at him. Look to him and you find your hope. And if you find that you're stuck with some thought balloon or some prayer that's taking you nowhere, let it go. Just release it. Let it go up to him. Because he's always our focus. And then read the next words. As always, read what he has to say. For it says in verse 48 that Jesus said to him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? That's our focus, those words. And Luke alone has that sentence, those words. Each of the gospel writers gives us a different angle, but those in the English, depending on which translation you have, 10, 11, 9, 12 words, not many words. But those words, and in my Bible, they're in red. That's our focus. Now, as I've been doing here, as we look at this, as we've been studying through Luke for quite a while, I don't want to just show you what Luke says. I want to definitely focus on that because Luke says some things that no one else does. But if it helps us, and it usually does, to take things from Matthew, Mark, John, I usually try and pull those in alongside. And most of you kind of know the story anyway. But here's these words that Jesus says. And Matthew and Mark tell us that this was the plan that Judas had that night. That Judas had a plan, and like all plans, where did that come from? But it was his plan. It was his way of designating when he'd already decided that he was going to turn Jesus over to his enemies, turn him over to the religious leaders who had been wanting for years to lay hold of him. Had already decided years before, we've got to destroy him. When Judas decided to turn him over, to betray him, he didn't want to go, though Passover season is a full moon. You can still make mistakes out there in the dark, and it's a crowded time of year, so there's lots of people there. And Judas wants to make sure they get the right guy. And he's thinking, look, I'm not going to just go in there maybe in a crowd. Jesus was typically around so many people. I'm not just going to go in and point the finger, because pointing fingers often backfires. And, the ones that are always aimed at you, when you point fingers, maybe you miss. So I'm not going to point a finger. I'm going to plant a kiss. This is going to be a precision-guided weapon I'm going in with. And I'm going to just land that kiss, laser focused, locked in, and we're told that he said, seize him, secure him. He didn't want him to get away. And that was his plan. This is the way it's going to work. But apparently something happened. His plan was to just go in and kiss him, like in a lot of languages. I know in Spanish and some other words were friend and love, and all of these are mixed together. And same with the word kiss. In the Greek, it's the same word for phileo, friendship, love. He's gonna come give this kiss of love, but that being his plan, something changed because he talked about just coming and giving him a kiss, which was customary then for a friend. You come up and you embrace him, but rather than just a formal peck on the cheek or whatever was the way of just giving a kiss, we're told in Matthew's gospel that when he got there, he began to fervently kiss him. It's a Greek word that indicates that he's doing something over and over again. It's something is not quite the way he had planned it. He said, I'm just going to come and kiss him, but he gets there and he's really kissing him. In fact, it's the exact same word that Luke gave to us when he told us that story of the prodigal son. And the son comes back and the father embraces him and keeps kissing him over and over and over again. This fervent, loving kiss. And you wonder, at least I wonder, what's going on in the heart of Judas? Why is this happening? I wonder that about my own heart. I'll never know. Everyone else has their own story, and Judas may be the most mysterious. But it helps me with my own story when I don't know what's really going on. I thought it was going to be this way, and now something's starting to turn. And the heart, of course, is more deceitful than all else. Who can know it? But he said, I'm just going to go kiss him. This is just going to be precision guided. I want you to get him. And he goes up and he just starts fervently kissing him. And it may just be, super hypocritical, this public display of affection so that everyone would never doubt that I love him and I'm not the guy that did anything bad. Maybe it was just lousy acting, just over the top, like, what school of acting did you go to? What a hypocrite you are. Maybe it's just that. Maybe it's something far more. But it wasn't what he said he was going to do. And Matthew tells us, it's not here in Luke, Matthew tells us that Jesus exclaimed. Jesus said, friend, what you're doing. And it's just that way. And you go to Matthew's gospel, you try and look into the original, you try and get the best interpretation, and the best interpreters have a hard time interpreting it. Because it's almost like a groan too deep for words. It's not a command, do what you're doing. It's not a question, what are you doing? It's an exclamation, like a groan. What you're doing. What you're doing. And then the first word is friend, comrade. What you're doing. The tender tone. Whatever else that word, comrade, friend means. It's on Jesus' side, nothing cynical. We can twist words with the tone of our voice, can't we? I mean, one of the ways you can really get in the dig is to say something you don't mean, you're sarcastic, and you say, friend. Ye friend. But when Jesus said friend, it wasn't cynical, it wasn't hateful, it was just grief. Friend, what you're doing. And then back now to, the words that Luke alone has, the ones that we have right here in front of us. Back to those words. Jesus said to him, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? And as we got this far last week, and I find, if I'm going too slow through the Gospel of Luke, too bad. Quit coming, I'll just do it by myself. Because I need it. And the more I look at it, the more I see. And the more I see, the more it helps. And I could always go through faster. I've taught through the whole Bible, Old Testament, New, 5-6 times. I was raised as a Catholic. I can pray fast well. I can move through words. The more you cover, kind of like Facebook, the more likes, the more friends, the more... No, not. It's not about a mile wide and an inch deep. It's about whatever it takes to go deep. And I keep finding here in Luke, is I keep thinking we're going to cover 3 verses, 5 verses, 10 verses, and every time I run out of time. And I look at it and I say, I see more, and then I think about it for another week, and then I see even more. And so it's not my plan, like, gosh, I wonder if I can stay in the Gospel of Luke for like 100 years. I mean, what better place to stay than in one of the Gospels? But no, it's simply, that's the way it's working for me. And for me, this sentence, these 10, 11 words, for me, all week long, they've been like an endless loop going round and round in my brain, which is a whole lot better than a lot of other things, a lot of other endless loops. Often it's something someone said to me, some kind of a backstabbing kiss, and what I'm going to say back, and boy, this loop goes over and over and over. What a relief to get a better loop, a red letter loop, a Jesus loop going over and over in my mind. And that's the way it's been for me this week, and I don't often open up my brain and let people into it. It's a dangerous place to go. But that's kind of what I want to share with you today. The things that I've been thinking as I just go over and over, because the different ways in which you can read it, the different ways in which you can emphasize different words, each gives a different angle, different vista, different set of things to see. And it's all true and it's all there, but you just don't notice it unless you come around it from a different angle. And so there's lots of ways that you can read it. Traditionally, we read this sentence as though the word kiss is the emphasis. And tone of voice will always tell you, but we don't have a recording of how Jesus said it. And so I'll read it different ways with different tones, but even the Greek language here isn't all that helpful. There's no one word that's like, that's the word, that's what this whole sentence is about. But traditionally, we focus in on the word kiss. The tool he used. You betray me with a kiss? The weapon, a kiss? Really? Seriously? And that's the way we traditionally look at it, and maybe that is the best way, but there are other ways to look at it as well. And clearly it's a question. It's not an answer. And that's the way the Lord tends to teach us. If you read the Gospels carefully, you'll see that maybe there's more questions than answers. Ultimately, Jesus is the answer, but the Lord wants you to think. He doesn't want you to read and be taught by rote and to memorize. We're not robots to be programmed. We're people that he wants to talk to, and he wants us to think. And this is a question. And it's a question, first of all, offered to Judas. Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? It's a question offered to Judas, and for me, I had to change the way I was going to say that. Because the first way I was going to say it was, it's a question aimed at Judas. Because a lot of times I think that maybe God's playing the same games we play. You say something, it looks like it's tender and kind and sincere, but it's actually a weapon. It's aimed against you. You ask a question, but you really don't want an answer, and you don't even really care if the person thinks. You just want to get them a dig. And a question can be as good as a kiss in terms of wounding someone. But no, I don't accept that about Jesus. He's not aiming a question at Judas to make him look or feel stupid or whatever we might do. This is a question offered to Judas, like a gift. And I've pointed it out because I keep seeing it myself. A question can be the greatest gift that you receive if you receive it from somebody who loves you, if you receive it from God. One of the worst things we can do is go on and on and on in our certainty when we're wrong. Who's going to question that? And yet to question yourself in the presence of God, to question yourself in the presence of someone who unconditionally loves you, that's the greatest gift of all. To know that if even you turn over a thought and it frightens you, perfect love casts out all fear. And we all talk about self-discovery and all the ways in which we try to find ourselves and all the things that people do. But I think the best way to find yourself is to question yourself in the presence of him who has found you and who does love you. And so this is a gift to Judas. It's a gift to all of us because we can read it and learn. It's offered to all of us. But it does say Judas. It's for you, Judas. It's a gift of love. And like the shepherd, he calls by name, Judas. Judas was a good name. People in that day were proud to have the name Judas. Judas was a one kid. People don't name their kids Judas anymore. I don't think I've ever gone to school with a Judas. A few Judes. You're okay if you're a Jude, but you got the us on there, and we already associate the Judas kiss and all of this sort of stuff, but not then. Judas was a good name. And Judas could have been a good man. And maybe he still could. That's the question. You're not living up to the name, Judas. I know who you are. The ultimate promise is one day in the heavens, he'll call us by name, and it's a name that he alone knows. And it's a good purpose. It's a good plan that he has for us. But he speaks to this one that he loves. I hope you don't doubt that. Jesus loves Judas. All the caricatures we've made of him. Would Jesus forgive Judas? In a heartbeat, if he wants it. Can we forgive him? I don't think we ever have. We still put him, like Dante, we put him at the center of hell. But Judas isn't the enemy. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but powers and principalities, spiritual forces of wickedness. Judas wasn't the enemy. Judas was flesh and blood. And as Jesus said to the other disciples, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And so Jesus calls him by name. It's a good name. He hasn't lived up to it. Can he still live up to it if he wants to? If he wants to receive forgiveness, if he wants to question himself and say, Lord, what can I do? Whenever we do that, he'll help us find ourselves. But that's the first thing I see. It's a question offered to him, a gift. Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? And another way, a second way we can emphasize it is the are you. Like, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? Like, is this really you? Are you doing this? Again, you may jump to conclusions any time when I'm talking and think that I'm trying to make excuses for Judas. And maybe you think I have a similar problem to him, lover of money, and maybe that's why. You can psychoanalyze someone at a distance. We do it all the time. We're good at it. Diabolos, a devil. Like I said earlier, you can be an angel or you can be a devil. Funny thing is that when Paul talks to Timothy or Titus about potential devils, he used that same word, diabolos. He's always worried about the women, that they might be devils. Watch out for them. And he's using, we translate it as malicious gossips. But that's what it means. It means using your mouth to throw stones, diabolos, to throw through, using your mouth to hurt someone, to harm them, to tear them down. Of course we can do that. Sadly, we can, just as we can be angels. Again, not the spirit being, the human being. The Spirit of Christ working in us. An angel, the word evangel, means a good angel, a good messenger, a good message. And so the question, again, it's not to make excuses, it's to find forgiveness. We all need forgiveness. Our Father. Don't limit that to your tribe, your group, your nation, your whatever. God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. Our Father. Feed us, forgive us, deliver us. No excuses. Excuses don't redeem, they don't restore, they don't reconnect. We need forgiveness. We need light, we need truth, we need to question ourselves. And Jesus asked Judas, are you the one doing this? Are you behind this? Again, not it's a conspiracy, not, it's the devil's fault. But you know what? The devil does have something that is Satan, the devil, Satanas. He does have something to do with this. Look where we began. Look back at the beginning of this chapter. Chapter 22, verse 1 says, the feast of the unleavened bread, which is called the Passover, was approaching. And the chief priests and scribes were seeking how they might put Jesus to death, but they were afraid of the people. And Satan entered into Judas, who was called Iscariot, belonging to the number of the 12. And he went away and he discussed with the chief priests and officers how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and they agreed to give him money. And he consented and began seeking a good opportunity to betray him to them apart from the multitude. I don't know what all that means, but it's pretty clear. Satan entered into him. And then the rest of it plays out. And in John's gospel, it's even more pointed. John said, John 13, that during supper, the devil having already put it into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him. Then he goes on with his story of the Last Supper, the washing of the feet and all. But he says, at that supper, the devil having already put it into the heart of Judas to betray him. And then John gives the story, and you might remember that when Peter's curious and John questions, who is it? You know, not the is it I, Lord? Is it I, like Matthew and Mark say? But John has something where John's seated right next to Jesus. He's close enough to hear a whisper. And Peter across on the other side, curious minds always want to know, who is it? Who is it? And John leans back, who is it? And Peter said, Jesus said, the one that I give this gift to. And then what Jesus did next was the equivalent of a kiss. A kiss at mealtime, because they're all eating the meal, right? And when you're in the midst of a meal, no matter how much you love all the brothers and sisters and friends and family there, in the middle of a meal, you don't get up and give a kiss, especially when all the guys have got beards. It's just nasty. And I'm not saying you guys that have beards, and I'm not picking on you. I wore a beard for many years. And one of my reasons for finally shaving it off was that my wife got tired of the leftovers from, But that's just me. You guys are on top of it. I'm not putting down beards. How did I get out here on this limb? Same with a mustache. At any rate. Where did I go with? I was just simply saying that it wasn't considered kosher or polite to be giving kisses in the middle of a meal. What you did, if you wanted to give somebody a kiss, not just blow it across the table, but what you did is you took a bit of bread and you dipped it in the dip, and then you fed it to them. A very tender and loving thing, kind of like a bride and groom and the wedding cake and all of that shit. I know nowadays they shove it up each other's nose and makes for a funny picture, but the symbolism of the wedding cake and feeding it to each other was supposed to be tenderness and kindness in the course of a meal. And I love you and I care for you. And we're told that Jesus did that to Judas. Not to point out the one. Would Jesus do what Judas did? Would Jesus say, I just want to make sure that we're locked in on target. I want to make sure that this is precision, no collateral damage. No, the Lord loved Judas. And he simply showed him, I love you. And he dipped the morsel and he gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. And John says, after the morsel, Satan then entered into him. And Jesus said to him, what you do, do quickly. Said to who? Satan entered into him. And Jesus said to him, what you do, do quickly. Was he talking to Satan or was he talking to Judas? I don't know. But more is going on here. Already John has said that the devil had already planted the idea. During the supper, the devil had already put it into the heart of Judas. And now later, after this kiss of kindness in the meal, now we're told that Satan entered into him, and Jesus said to him, what you do, do quickly. So you see why I find it interesting to read it that way? That Jesus would be saying, Judas, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? Again, not to give him an excuse, but to help him see that, you know what? Maybe there's more about this than you know. It's not so that Jesus could forgive him. God can forgive anything. There's nothing he wouldn't forgive if we ask for forgiveness. But how can we forgive ourselves? How can we forgive our neighbor, especially if we got the Judas kiss from them? And how important it is to understand that it's not as cut and dry as we tend to be, cut and dry. To know there's something more. Is it just you behind all of this? Satan's involved somewhere. He's the enemy. In fact, in Luke's narrative, if we were reading the Gospel of Luke quickly, it wouldn't take you more than a couple of hours to read it. If you just sat down and read the Gospel of Luke, you'd see that the last time we saw Satan, that spirit being, the last time it said Satan was there, was the last time Jesus had been ministered to by an angel. There he was in the wilderness, and an angel had come, again, just to keep him alive as he And his love was almost, his body couldn't handle as he was fighting this battle for us. And we're told at that point that after all of those temptations, Luke says that then, having gone through all of those temptations, that the devil left him. When the devil had finished every temptation, he departed from him until an opportune time. Well, guess what this is? Guess what the garden is? Guess what the serpent's up to in the midst of the garden? He's taken on Adam again. He's taking on humanity, all of us. This isn't a battle just with Jesus. This is a battle for all of us. It's an opportune time, and he comes and he does what he's doing. And Jesus may be saying, Judas, is this really you? Is that all there is? Again, not for excuse, but simply that you might forgive yourself later to realize that, no, nobody made you do this. The devil didn't make you do it. But you know what? We live in a world of complexities. And what moves us, again, I don't know. I don't have to psychoanalyze myself before I say, God, forgive me. Feed us, forgive us, deliver us from doing it again. It's so basic to our humanity. So that's another way of looking at it. A third way you could emphasize a third word is the word betray. Judas, are you betraying me? Because the word betray means to hand over, to turn someone in, to turn them over to their enemies. And it fits the story, but not when you see the fuller story. To turn Jesus over to his enemies? Was Judas even capable of doing that? Did Judas have the power to turn Jesus over to his enemies? How many times have we seen when someone plays the enemy and Jesus doesn't want this to be the point? He just passes through their midst. We saw that back at his hometown earlier in Luke's gospel. Jesus said, no one takes my life away from me. I lay it down. Jesus was turning himself over to the hour and the power of darkness for our sake. John makes it clear because in John's gospel, this whole thing of the kiss is left out. It doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means John says that's not even necessary as a part of the story. Because in John's gospel, Jesus steps forth. There's Judas, he's leading the crowd, but Jesus actually steps forth and says, who are you looking for? And that whole scene where all the soldiers fall back on their fannies when he says, I am. No one turned him in. No one turned him over. Maybe Judas thought that was what he was doing. Certainly the religious leaders thought that's what they were doing. But the question might just be, Judas, are you handing over the Son of Man? Who's handing over the Son of Man? It's the Son of Man who hands himself over. And seeing in whose hands things are makes all the difference in the world. It's in my hands. This isn't yours to hand over. So trust. Keep your heart in my hands. Another way you could read it is to say, are you betraying the Son of Man? To make Son of Man the emphasis of the sentence. Are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss? That would be a good word to emphasize because Jesus, that was his favorite. He loved to call himself the Son of Man, especially in Luke's gospel, over and over. He delighted in identifying with the Addams family, the wackos like you and me, the ones that we might like to think that, well, I'm not like them. That's the world and I'm me. It's too bad that God so loved the world. Too bad that God died for sinners. Paul said, I think I'm the worst. Judas would probably say, oh, no, Paul. But you know, each of us from our own perspective, to know that you fail isn't to put you on the outside, it's to put you right in the center of his love, his focus, his attention. Jesus loved to identify with our humanity. And if Jesus asks us to think, what are you doing to the Son of Man? It would help us maybe to see that what you do to the Son of Man, you do to all of humanity. And what you do to humanity, you do to yourself. Judas, who's betraying who? Judas, you're betraying yourself. You're turning yourself over into the hands of the enemy. Who was hurt worst by this? Jesus, of course, was hurt. We're always hurt when someone does that kind of thing. But, wow, Judas, where was the damage the worst? Pity poor Judas. I can't help it. And remember, I'll remind you if you don't, the last time Jesus called Judas friend, it wasn't that long ago, and we spent quite a few weeks in that section. I'll just read it to you, because we don't have to, boy, you get me back there, and we're going to get stuck there again. But it was in that whole section, and I can't even turn the pages fast enough because my glasses don't work, and my fingers are getting old, and everything is failing me, and finally, all the mumbling is done. Here it is, in Luke 12. Under these circumstances, after so many thousands of the multitude had gathered together that they were stepping on one another. Remember that? The great Jesus gathering. Kumbaya, and let me step on you so I can get closer to Jesus. Under these circumstances, he said to his disciples, first of all, that's you if you want to be, that's me because I do want to be, that's Judas. He says to all, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. Watch out for hypocrisy. There's nothing covered up that will not be revealed, nothing hidden that will not be known. Accordingly, whatever you've said in the dark, it shall be heard in the light. Whatever you've whispered in the inner rooms shall be proclaimed upon the housetops. Not threats, these are encouragements. And I say to you, my friends, not my friends minus Judas, I'm saying to all of you, my friends, don't be afraid of those who can destroy the body, and after that they have no more power. I warn you whom to fear. Fear the one who, after he has killed, has authority to cast you into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear that one. And lest you think, oh, that must mean fear God. No, he says, aren't 5 sparrows sold for 2 cents? And yet not one of them is forgotten before God. Indeed, the very hairs of your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid. You're of more value than many sparrows. It says, don't fear those who could kill you. Don't fear God who stands there even when sparrows die. Fear that one inside of you. And really, that's the thing to watch out for. What is inside of you? And if you see it, God save me, and he'll save you. If you see what it's done, God forgive me, and he'll forgive you. And whatever that's asked, whenever that's seen, of course, there's no end. It's not a time limit, Sorry, can't ask for forgiveness. Your time has run out. Anyone who wants mercy will get mercy. Anyone who wants forgiveness will be forgiven. Why? Because God loves you. He'll never give up on you. Don't give up on yourself. Don't turn yourself over. Don't betray yourself. Don't fail to live up to the good name that he has for you. And if you feel sad someday because you think maybe you have, don't sleep from sorrow. Don't get depressed. Rise up in prayer. He loves you. He'll never stop loving you. He'll never stop caring for you. He'll never refuse to forgive you. Just ask. And so here's Judas in that situation. And then he says finally with a kiss, and maybe that's, what a tool, what a weapon to use. A kiss. But let me just conclude, because like I said, I see a lot more here, so just wait till next week. But you know what? I'll see a lot more when I let the right kind of loop run through my mind this next week. I hope it does for you as well. Think about it. Self-discovery. It happens here. In God's word, in the presence of someone who loves you. There's something about betrayal. It seems like whatever wound it is, it goes so much deeper when you've been betrayed. When somebody has done that. And just understand this, Jesus knows. If you feel that way today, he knows. It would be better to be hit by an enemy, better to be hit by an axe than to have someone you love. Someone come and kiss you and then sell you out. Jesus knows. Here's the thing to hold on to. Don't hold on to that. It's too hot, too heavy. Too much. You got to let it go. You can't live there. You can't dwell on that betrayal. The focus is healing. It's never the Judas kiss. The focus is always the focus of God. He wants to heal you. He wanted to heal and help Judas. He doesn't change. All the wounds of Jesus, I think you know this, but let me just remind you, all the wounds of Jesus were made by us. And all those wounds were made for us. None of us could have gotten through to him unless he did what love does. He made himself vulnerable. And we did our worst, and he allowed all of that done by us for us. And the same thing applies to Judas. Whatever terrible wounds Judas gave to Jesus, those same wounds Jesus bore for Judas. Go ahead. Thomas, you want to put your hand in my side? Whatever it takes. Judas, you would do this? Judas isn't the enemy. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. It helps a lot to know that. I'll tell you where to focus. It's to say, you know it's going to be Jesus, right? But you know there's a proverb, many of you know it. Listen to it in the light of all of this. Proverbs 27:6 says, more faithful are the wounds of a friend than the kisses of an enemy. And whatever translation or whatever application you may have made, great. But here's a new one. At least it's new to me. In the light of all of this, more faithful are the wounds of a friend. The wounds of Jesus. The ones we gave him. That's faithful. Where are you going to put your wounded faith? Put it in his faithful wounds. Where are you going to put the self-discovery that makes you feel like just sleeping from sorrow, or worse? Give it to him. He loves you. He cares for you. There's light and life and hope always, always, always in him. The wounds of a friend. Don't focus on the kisses of an enemy. The wounds of a friend are more faithful than the kisses of an enemy. Focus on his wounds. That's what he always told his disciples to do, didn't he? Look here. It's hard to trust, isn't it? And if you've been trusted and then you've betrayed, how can you ever trust yourself? Or why would you expect anyone else to do that again? Or if you've been the one who's been betrayed by someone, and how can I ever trust again? But you know, we've got to learn to, because that's life, that's family, that's love. Jesus didn't entrust himself to people. He knew what was inside of all people. But he gave himself for all. And it's learning that. And it all starts here. You know, the serpent has this nasty habit. From Garden 1 to the Garden of Gethsemane, he likes to be in center stage. He slithers in, and then he starts his dialogue. Don't talk to him. If you're talking to a snake, something's wrong. Don't put the kissing devil on center stage. Set that aside. Put the wounded friend. The lamb as though slain, seated on the throne, the center of the universe. Get your eyes back there. Keep your eyes there. That's where the healing comes from. Let's turn to him.
For the friend who's still faithful, for the health that remains, for fire in winter, for comfort in pain, for the shade in the summer, for stars in the night, hope that you give me when no hope's in sight, hope that you give me when Father, help me to see all of the ways you provided for me. Teach my heart how to sing, finding the way to give thanks in all things, finding the way to give thanks in all things. For the health that remains, for fire in winter, for remains, for fire in winter, for comfort in pain, for the shade in the sun, for stars in the night, and hope that you give me when no hope's in sight.